On the day I turned 68, I expected a simple gift, a call, a hug, maybe just a kind word from my daughter. Instead, I heard her voice saying the cruelest thing a mother could imagine. The best gift would be if she just died. My name is Eleanor. I am 68 years old, and I never thought I would live to hear such words come from the mouth of my only daughter. It happened on my birthday. That morning I baked myself a small cake. Nothing fancy, just a boxed yellow cake with chocolate frosting. I set one candle in the middle. I thought Rebecca, my daughter, and her husband David might come by later in the evening. I wanted to believe we would still celebrate like a family. I sat down in my armchair by the window with a cup of tea and my phone on the table beside me. Rebecca had promised to call. I waited. The clock ticked past noon, then 2 o'clock. Finally, the phone buzzed. A voice message. I pressed play, expecting to hear her say, "Happy birthday, Mom." Instead, what came through the speaker froze me to the bone. Rebecca's voice, sharp and tired. The best gift would be if she just died. And then David's low laugh, like he agreed. I dropped the phone. My hand shook so badly I spilled tea on my lap. My heart pounded in my chest, and for a moment I could not breathe. Did I hear that right? My daughter, my only child, wishing me dead? I picked up the phone again, pressed play, and listened once more. The words didn't change. They were still there, cruel and cold, stabbing deeper each time. In that moment, I felt my whole life collapse in on itself. I thought of the nights I worked double shifts at the nursing home so Rebecca could have new shoes for school. I thought of the winters when I kept the thermostat low to save money for her college tuition. I thought of the day I walked her down the aisle, proud and trembling, believing she would always carry my love with her. And now, this. I sat there in my quiet little house in Denver, the cake untouched on the counter, the single candle unlit. The silence in the room pressed down on me until it was hard to swallow. I stared at that candle and thought, why did I even bother? You know, people often say that old age makes you tough, that after 60 or 70 years of living, nothing can surprise you anymore. But let me tell you, when betrayal comes from your own flesh and blood, it cuts deeper than any wound time can give. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered aloud, though no one could hear me. My own daughter, my Rebecca. Tears rolled down my cheeks, hot and heavy. I wish I could tell you I screamed, or that I marched straight to her house to demand an explanation. But the truth is, I froze. My voice was gone. My strength was gone. All that was left was shock pure, paralyzing shock. As the hours passed, I kept replaying the message, as if maybe the words would change. Maybe I misheard. But no, they never changed. Each time, Rebecca's voice hit me like a hammer. The best gift would be if she just died. By evening, the little cake had gone dry. The frosting had hardened. I hadn't touched a bite. My appetite was gone. My joy was gone. And a question kept circling in my mind. How could the child I raised with my own 2 hands wish me dead? That night, I sat by the window long after dark, watching the headlights pass by on the street below. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was living her life, laughing with David, while I sat alone with a phone full of proof that my own child wanted me gone. I knew then that my life had changed forever. There was no going back to the way things were before. The bond I thought unbreakable had cracked wide open. But to truly understand why those words shattered me so deeply, you need to know what came before the years of sacrifice, the endless giving, the love that was never returned. But to truly understand why those words shattered me so deeply, you need to know what came before the years of sacrifice, the endless giving, the love that was never returned. And that is where my story turns next. After that voice message shattered my birthday, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was quiet, the clock ticking louder than ever. My eyes drifted to the old notebook I kept on the shelf, its cover worn and edges frayed. That notebook held the story of my life, not in words, but in numbers. Page after page, year after year, I had written down every expense, every sacrifice. It was my way of keeping track when times were hard, and oh, how hard they were. I remembered the nights I left home at sunset to work the night shift at the nursing home, then rushed at dawn to clean hotel rooms until noon. My body ached, but I kept going, because Rebecca needed new shoes, school supplies, and food on the table. I remembered the winter when the furnace broke, and instead of fixing it right away, I bought Rebecca the coat she had begged for. I told her to keep warm under the blankets while I boiled water on the stove to take the chill off the house. Later, when college came, I took a loan against the house. I can still see the papers spread out on the table, the pen shaking in my hand as I signed. I promised myself it would be worth it if Rebecca got her education. When she graduated, I worked overtime again to pay for the wedding she dreamed of. A white dress, a hall filled with music and food, flowers everywhere. I remember smiling as she walked down the aisle, even though my back was sore from the extra shifts I had taken to cover the cost. Then came the time when she and David struggled with their mortgage. They called me in tears, and I pulled from my small savings to help them keep their house. I told myself, that's what mothers do. They give, even when there's little left to give. Every page in that notebook told the same story. Sacrifice after sacrifice. Not once did I count the cost to myself. I only asked, does Rebecca have what she needs? I pressed my hand to the worn pages and closed my eyes. Tears slid down my face. How could the same child, for whom I had given everything, now say the best gift would be my death? I want to pause here and ask you something, dear listener. Have you ever kept a record like that, not on paper but in your heart? Have you carried the weight of every hour you worked, every meal you skipped, every dollar you spent on your children, only to feel they have forgotten? If you have, share it in the comments below. Let others see your story, because when we speak, we remind each other that we are not alone in this pain. I thought back to those long nights, the meals skipped, the small joys denied so Rebecca could have more. I thought of the birthday parties I never had because the money went to her gifts. And then I thought of her words again. The best gift would be if she just died. The contrast was too heavy to bear. My sacrifices were bricks building her life, and now she treated me as if I were just a burden standing in her way. I closed the notebook slowly and placed it back on the shelf. The kitchen felt colder, the silence thicker. I stared at the chair where Rebecca once sat as a child, swinging her legs, eating the meals I cooked. That chair was empty now, and so was my heart. But silence can only last so long. Pain that is buried will always find a way to rise, and in the years after Rebecca married David, the signs of betrayal began to surface. That is where my story turns next into the years of endurance, the quiet humiliations, the bitter words that grew into the storm I could no longer ignore. When Rebecca married David, at first I told myself it was only natural for her to drift away a little. Newlyweds have their own lives, their own priorities. But as the months turned into years, the gap between us grew wider and wider. Phone calls became shorter. Visits became rarer. Holidays once spent together were now too busy, too far, or maybe next year. The little girl who once clung to my hand now kept me at arm's length. And David? From the very first time he stepped into my home, I could feel his eyes roaming over the walls, the furniture, the framed photographs. It was not admiration, it was calculation. One evening they came for dinner. I had cooked a pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal Rebecca used to love. We sat at the table, but the warmth was gone. David leaned back in his chair, smirking. David, one old woman doesn't need a big house like this. His words were casual, but the meaning was sharp. I forced a smile. This house is my home, I said softly. Every corner has a memory. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Rebecca, you're holding on to the past, Mom. Let go already. Her voice had that clipped edge, as if she were scolding a child, not speaking to her mother. I swallowed hard and looked down at my plate. The food blurred before my eyes. I had worked 2 jobs for years to buy this house. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was the proof of my survival. Another time, David picked up my mail without asking, flipping through the envelopes as if they were his own. He paused at a bank statement, raised an eyebrow, and smirked. David, you're sitting on a lot of equity here, Eleanor. You should think about transferring it. We could manage it for you. I wanted to snatch the paper back, but instead I stayed still, my hands trembling under the table. And then there was the Sunday at church. I told a simple story about Rebecca as a child, how she used to sing in the choir. Rebecca turned bright red and hissed at me afterward, "Don't embarrass me like that again." Little by little, the small humiliations piled up. Each word, each glance, chipped away at my heart. But I told myself, she's my daughter, she's all I have. And so I stayed quiet. But inside, Something was breaking. The night I heard the voice message, it wasn't just the words, "the best gift would be if she just died," that hurt. It was every moment before it. The cold dinners, the rolled eyes, the opened mail, the subtle pushes toward the nursing home, all crashing down at once. I sat at my kitchen table that night, thinking about all the times I had swallowed my pride, all the times I had told myself to endure. And for what? To be treated like a burden? Dear listener, if you've ever felt that kind of quiet betrayal, the kind that doesn't shout but chips away at you slowly, you know how heavy it feels. If this story touches something in you, please give this video a like. Not for me, but so others who feel the same can find it and know they're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, more voices from people who have walked this hard road, subscribe to the channel. Together we can make sure no one has to sit in silence. I looked around my kitchen and saw the chair where Rebecca used to sit swinging her legs as a child, giggling at my jokes. Now that chair was empty. My phone sat on the table with her voice still echoing from it, cruel and cold. The years of endurance had led to this moment. But endurance is not the same as acceptance. Somewhere deep inside, a fire was starting to burn. And that fire would lead me to a decision I never thought I would make, a decision to stand up, to protect myself, and to finally confront what had been growing in the shadows. The days after that voice message felt like walking through a heavy, unending fog. Morning light still came through my curtains, but it felt dimmer, muffled, like the world had lost its edges. Yet inside that fog, a new strength began to stir. It didn't come all at once, it grew slowly, like a small flame that refuses to be smothered. I was done being quiet. I was done swallowing my pride, as if silence could keep me safe. The first step I took was to call Mr. Carter, the lawyer my late husband had once relied on. His voice was calm, measured, but when I played the message, the shift in him was undeniable. As the last cruel word ended, his jaw clenched and his eyes hardened. "Eleanor," he said, steady and firm, "you have to protect yourself. Don't sign anything. We'll move your assets into a trust. That way, no one can touch your home without your permission." I nodded, though my throat felt so tight it was hard to breathe. The words scraped as I whispered, "I never thought I'd need to guard myself against my own child." Saying it aloud felt like confessing to a nightmare I couldn't wake from. Over the next week, I followed his guidance carefully. My savings were shifted into accounts only I could access. The house papers were locked down, every loophole closed. Each step was tiring, but with every document signed and sealed, I felt a little steadier, like I was stitching armor around myself. Still, the ache inside didn't fade. Betrayal from strangers is cruel. Betrayal from your own child is unbearable. Then the invitation came. Rebecca called. "Mom," she said, her voice honeyed but too sweet. "Why don't you come over for dinner? We haven't seen you in a while." My stomach nodded, but I agreed. Something in me knew this was the moment everything would come to the surface. That evening, I chose my best Sunday blouse and skirt. I stood before the mirror, smoothing my hair, studying my lined face. "You're not weak," I whispered to myself. Not anymore. For years I'd believed silence was survival. Now I knew strength meant standing tall, even if your knees shook. When I arrived, the table was neatly set. Roast chicken, potatoes, salad. It smelled like comfort, but the air was heavy with tension. David greeted me with that polished smile of his, a smile I had never trusted. We sat down. Forks scraped softly, but no one truly ate. After a few bites, Rebecca cleared her throat and slid a folder across the table. "Mom," she said, her tone light but her hands trembling, "this is just routine paperwork. It'll make things easier if anything ever happens to you. Just sign here." I didn't move. My eyes fell to the folder. Power of attorney. Exactly what Mr. Carter had warned me about. My pulse hammered, but I lifted my gaze and held hers. "Rebecca," I said slowly, "why don't you tell me what this really is? Why don't you tell me what you and David planned the other night?" Her face drained of color. "Mom, I don't know what you mean." David leaned forward, his smile gone. His voice was sharp. "Eleanor, don't make this difficult. We're trying to help you." "Help me?" A bitter laugh slipped from my mouth. "Help me by shipping me off to a nursing home and selling my house?" Rebecca gasped. How do you know that?" I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. The best gift would be if she just died. The words hung like smoke in the air. Rebecca covered her mouth, eyes wide in shock. David muttered a curse, anger flaring in his face. I looked at them both. That's how I know. I may be old, but I'm not blind. And I'm not stupid. The silence was thick. Then David slammed his hand on the table, rattling the plates. You had no right to record that. It was sent to me by mistake, I said firmly. Maybe God wanted me to hear the truth. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Mom, please, don't. My voice cut her short. Don't call me Mom like that, not after plotting behind my back. She broke down, sobbing, her shoulders shaking. But David stayed hard, unmoved. So what now? He said coldly. You think you can fight us? I pulled out the folder Mr. Carter had given me, placed it on the table like a weapon. My house is protected. My accounts are in a trust. If you push me again, you'll see me in court. Rebecca whispered. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said, my voice trembling but unbroken. And the worst part isn't the money. It's knowing my own daughter sees me as nothing more than a burden. Her sobs grew louder, raw, almost childlike. David muttered something and stormed into the kitchen, his footsteps pounding against the floor. I rose slowly, my heart pounding. I will never sign your papers. I will never hand over my life. I picked up my purse, then looked at Rebecca one last time. I hope someday you understand what you've done. Until then, I'll protect myself. I will not be your victim. With that, I walked out into the cool night air. The breeze touched my face like a blessing, sweeping away the suffocating weight of that house. For the first time in years, my steps were steady. But leaving wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, the aftermath, where wounds do not vanish overnight and where choices must be made, forgiveness or the strength to let go forever. When I left Rebecca's house that night, I thought I would feel only anger. But as I walked into my own home, set down my purse, and sat in my familiar armchair, what I felt most was exhaustion. The confrontation was over, yes. I had drawn my line. My house was safe. My savings were protected. But the deeper wound, the wound in my heart, was not so easy to guard. In the days that followed, silence filled the space between us. Rebecca did not call. David, I'm sure, told her to keep her distance. Some neighbors who had heard whispers of what happened stopped by, offering kind words and pies, but when they left, the house was just as quiet as before. I found myself at the library one afternoon, sitting with a group of other women my age, sharing books and stories. For the first time in months, I laughed. Not the bitter laugh I gave David, but a soft, real laugh that felt like a breath of fresh air. I joined a church committee to deliver meals to seniors who couldn't get out anymore. Carrying a warm dish to a stranger's door, seeing their smile, it filled a hole inside me that Rebecca's betrayal had carved out. Life did not become easy, but it became mine again. I woke up each morning with purpose, not dread. And quietly, with Mr. Carter's help, I wrote my exit plan. If one day I no longer wake up, everything I own, this house, my accounts, even the little jewelry I kept, will go to a foundation that supports retired nurses. The thought gave me peace. I had spent my life giving. Now I would keep giving, but on my own terms. Then, weeks later, a letter came in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope made my heart stutter. Rebecca. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once fed her soup when she was sick, and opened it slowly. Mom, it began. I don't know how to explain myself. I know you think I betrayed you. Maybe I did. I thought I was doing what was best, but I see now how cruel it must have sounded. I can't take those words back. I don't expect you to forgive me now, but I hope someday you will. I read it once, then twice. The words blurred with tears. It was not a full apology. There were excuses tucked between the lines. Yet there was also fear, regret, maybe even love buried deep. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside my notebook of sacrifices. 2 stories, side by side, one of all I gave, and one of how it was almost thrown away. That night I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the mountains. I wondered if Rebecca would come back one day, not to claim papers or property, but to sit beside me as a daughter again. I don't know the answer. Life doesn't give us neat endings. But I do know this: betrayal does not erase love. It twists it, it bruises it, but deep inside, the bond of mother and child never fully breaks. Whether it can heal that is the question only time can answer. And maybe you, listening now, know that same question. If my story touched you, if you felt even a little of my pain, I ask you please give this video a like. Not for me, but so others like us, other parents sitting in silence, can find it and know they are not alone. And if you disagree with me, if you think I should have chosen differently, then leave the number 6 in the comments. Tell me your truth. I want to hear it. And finally, if you want to keep hearing stories like mine, stories that speak to the heart, stories that remind us of our strength even in betrayal, please subscribe to this channel. Together, we can build a place where no voice is lost and no pain goes unseen. As for me, I will keep living. I will tend my roses, join my book club, and serve meals to those who need them. I will keep my trust papers safe and my letter from Rebecca tucked away. And when the time comes for me to leave this world, I hope my story will remain not just as a tale of betrayal, but as proof that even in the darkest hurt, we can still choose dignity, purpose, and a life worth living.